What's up and happy Sunday to all of my War Report family. We are in here today on today's weekend tailgate talking about the strategic path towards success for Auburn football. Is it in the transfer portal? Is it in the high school ranks? Let's talk about it. Y'all know how we do. Let's get into today's weekend tailgate.
This is the Weekend Tailgate. Brought to you by Golden's Cast Iron. C-Dub. I Joe. Be Will. By G. You are now listening to
The weekend tailgate brought to you by the good folks at Golden's Cast Iron. Whether you work out, grill out, or chill out, make sure you head over to goldenscastiron.com/WR. It's right down there in the description of this video. Use code, get your weight up for 15% off of weights, code TWR for $65 off of fire pits and Kamado grills. We always appreciate the good folks at Golden's Cast Iron for sponsoring the show. Happy Mother's Day to everybody and happy Sunday to all of you out there. Before we get into the conversation, make sure you are going out there and sharing this content. Get more people involved in the conversation as we talk a little bit about recruiting, specifically high school versus the transfer portal. You definitely have to have a mix of both, but which way is Auburn leaning towards? We've heard a lot of comments from Coach Hugh Freeze, and we will get into those comments. Before we do, we want you guys to do some things, and that is come on board with the greatest online community that there is. Mike G, tell the people how they can become members of the War Report family.
You guys know the deal. $5.99 a month. Hit that join button right there in front of you on your YouTube app. Or if you're on your desktop, it says the same thing. It says join. Help us continue the work that we're doing here at the War Report. If you enjoy a lot of the content we've been putting out, Hugh Freeze interviews, player interviews, all kinds of stuff, you can help us keep that going by joining as a member, $5.99 a month. We also got some behind the paywall content that you definitely don't want to miss there. So please help us out. You can also give the gift of the War Report by hitting that gifted membership button. You guys do this every single live cast. We love that you do this. Helps keep what we're doing going here. So we appreciate you guys for doing that as well. Again, hit that gifted membership button. Help us keep other people engaged with what we're doing behind the paywall. Also want to give a big shout out to show sponsor Manscaped. Hey there, beach babes. Are you ready to soak up those summer vibes and unveil your ultimate beach bod? Well, you're in luck because our friends at Manscaped have you covered from head to toe with the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. This ultimate all-in-one grooming kit is set to have you looking and feeling your best this summer in the sun. Trust Manscaped and unlock your confidence you need to turn heads this season. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped.com with 20% off plus free shipping if you use code RAPPORT. Let's make this summer your smoothest one yet.
Yes, indeed. Code Report is your way to get into all of that. Well, let's get into the conversation. Coach Hugh Freeze, of course, talked to Mike G recently, and we'll get into some of his comments from that video. If you haven't watched that mix episode with Coach Hugh Freeze and Mike G, you can go and watch that as soon as we're done over here to get some more context. But he has been going around pretty much, doing his press thing recently. He was on with our friend Cole Kublik and that other guy, McElroy. I can call him a friend, even though he's never come on our show. Yes, Greg McElroy, I'm calling you out. Come on through and talk to the good folks at the War Report. But he was on with Mac and Cube recently and talking about just kind of the path to putting a roster together, particularly for this 2024 upcoming season. And then when he was on there, he talked about his options, and he's talked about his options with you, Mike, about what it is that he wants to do to build the program. And several times he's talked about, 2 more recruiting cycles and trying to build this thing and have the difficulty in the transfer portal. What he said to the folks over at Mac and Cube is the options that you are presented with are develop Peyton, develop Holden, develop Hank, develop Walker, or go spend $1 million on this guy. And I just couldn't bring myself to do that. So he specifically is like, hey, man, yeah, I could have gone out there and gotten a transfer portal quarterback. I'd have had to spend $1 million to do it. I didn't want to do that. And I felt like it's best for us to just develop the guys that we currently have in our room. Is that a sound strategy? And has high school recruiting been surpassed by the lust for quick return and the transfer portal in college football right now? How do you feel about that, Mike?
Let's go back to this statement here real quick, Ike. Okay, so develop, or spend $1 million.
Right.
Right. The last part of this, I think, is a tiny bit of cap. I couldn't bring myself to doing that. Yeah, I don't know. I think what he was really trying to say is the way my bank account is set up is we spent X amount on a quarterback already a year ago.
I didn't want to go there this early, but I did have a follow-up question because they were presented with this exact same situation last spring.
Yeah, they were.
I don't know the likelihood. It felt like post-spring, it was inevitable that TJ Finley was leaving, right? But that's the exact same scenario. Develop TJ, develop Robbie, develop Holden, develop Hank, or spend, I don't know if it was $1 million. It definitely wasn't $1 million then. Or spend money to go get a transfer portal quarterback. Do you think Coach Hugh Freeze learned that lesson last year and said, I'm not doing that again? I'm just going to lean into what I've traditionally done, which is figure out a way to, which actually, I mean, if you look at his history, he hasn't really developed a quarterback
from high school. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you think he learned that in this new transfer portal era? Is this a lesson learned, and that's why he has moved in this direction?
I think two things can be true here. It can be both a lesson learned, and it can be like, I don't really have that as an option this year.
Right.
Right. I think both those things are true. Right. He learned his lesson, sure. And I think that's why he's been beating the give me time drum, because it takes years to develop some of these kids directly out of high school. It takes years to do it. So you're going to have some guys who will be instant impact players like Cam Coleman. Instant impact QBs in the SEC are rare. It's hard to get a guy to come straight from high school and play like a veteran and be effective and win you football games and say, hey, go win me the game.
Right.
So last season, if they felt like they had that on the roster, they would not have gone out and gotten Payton Thorne.
Yeah.
They didn't feel like they had that on the roster, so they went out and got Payton Thorne. This year, to your point about lessons learned, talent development is not an exact science. Evaluation is not an exact science.
Right.
So, yes, you can have a guy who you believe in, but will it translate to this league and the schedule and what you need him to do with the roster that you have? That's the part that's always iffy. Right. So do I just roll the dice? And it feels like to me, again, what he's been trying to tell everybody is, I think he thinks Payton Thorne is who he is. So what I need to do to get the best Payton Thorne is improve all the pieces around him, improve the O-line, improve the receivers, improve the play calling, and get to the other side of 2024 so that the quarterback that I have with the higher ceiling has a chance to take us to the next level, but we've already improved the pieces for that guy. So he's stepping in to a more developed situation than Payton stepped into.
Okay.
Right. On the front end of your tenure, taking over a program to turn it around, this is a challenge I think that every coach faces. What do I do with the current roster? Who do I continue to invest in? Who do I tell to walk?
Right.
Now with the portal, though, it's kind of changed that whole who do I continue to invest in conversation, because you have more opportunities to go out and get guys that wouldn't otherwise have been in the transfer portal or looking to transfer. This is the new college football that I think that a lot of people are having trouble adapting to, Isaac. So, how did Auburn do? I mean, like I said, I just think when you look at that statement there, there's a lot to that. And a lot of it is, not only did we learn our lesson, but we actually we don't have a choice here. We can't go out and spend another X amount. You're going to have to spend probably double or triple what you spend on Payton Thorne.
Yeah.
right? And
Easily.
that also does not encompass the promises and commitments you made to guys to get them to come to your program. Right? Like you told Walker White something that made him feel comfortable about that he would be the heir apparent of Auburn. If you go out and you're constantly getting another guy in the portal in his position, you're not going to be able to keep selling him that. I think Hugh Freeze knows that.
There's a couple of things that I want to highlight from what you're talking about right there. One is, yes, it's not an unlimited piggy bank that you can just, turn over and dump and change continues to flow out of it like some people want to assume that it is.
Right.
And you've allocated a lot of those resources elsewhere to do what you just said, which is develop the things around the quarterback so that you don't have to go spend a bunch of money on the quarterback, right? So you've spent a lot of those resources in other places. But here's the question that I want to ask you, Mike, about the quarterback situation as it moves forward, because Peyton Thorne's not going to be here next year. Do you think that Coach Hugh Freeze is convinced today that he has his quarterback of the future on this roster? Or are we going to be right back here in this same place asking the question, do we run with one of those guys or go out here and get somebody from the transfer portal? And I know I'm asking you to look into the mind of Coach Hugh Freeze here.
Yeah. I'm thinking in my mind right now, based on conversations that we've had with him directly, I think you're right back here next year. Hear me out.
Because none of these guys, if Peyton Thorne plays well enough, will play any snaps this year.
Yeah. From
other than like garbage time against some scrubs, right? So you're going to be, if Peyton Thorne pans out the way that you hope that he does, plays well enough to get you 7-8 wins, whatever that may be, above the mark of mediocrity that people, want to attribute Auburn to potentially, then you're going to be back here with 3 guys that have very little snaps, really 2, because Holden Gerner's 1 foot out of the door at this point in time, right?
Right.
So 2 guys and a freshman are what your quarterback room is going to be looking like.
Unless you pull the plug on Peyton early enough in the season that Hank can prove that he can be the guy moving forward. And to me, that's a precarious situation for Walker White, because Hank has a lot of eligibility left. And, this is the new college football, right? Everybody who's running a program has to deal with this. This is why you hope that one of your young guys is clearly the leader, because, if you're, look at Georgia, for example. Carson Beck took over, right? And Brock Vandergrift is out of there. I think he went to Kentucky, right?
Right.
You've got Gunnar Stockton sitting on the bench, and then you had Jaden Rashada, right? Like just transfer in there, but everybody understands they're going to sit behind Carson Beck.
Correct.
Because you have a guy who you developed in your system that took over when it was his time. So I think the question is there an heir apparent after this year?
Right. Yeah. One of these guys going to be ready.
That will clearly be ready to take over the job and that you will ride with, because once you have that guy and he's going to play 2, maybe 3 years, it makes the pipeline of bringing guys in easier to predict and easier to sell. And part of this is like no player wants to sit behind a player they feel like they're clearly better than.
Correct.
That's the hardest part. So, Ewers played well enough for Sarkisian to convince Arch Manning to wait.
Yeah. But Malik Murphy got up out of there.
Yeah, right. Correct. So, part of this is making sure you choose the right guy more times than not, so that you can convince the guys coming up behind them to wait their turn.
Right.
That's what's so hard about this, I think, if you're Hugh Freeze.
Yeah. It's
right.
I don't know how you begin to have this type of conversation with guys and figure out how to keep people happy in this climate.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot on Walker White right now.
There's only one QB. The guy that's holding.
I don't know if you guys can hear Ike, but he dropped out on my end. poor family at home. If you can hear me.
Can you hear me now?
No, there you go. There you go. Sorry.
Anyway, I don't know what just happened, but I was saying the guys in the position that are like the most awkward are Holden Geriner and Hank Brown, because they're right in, like, Walker White can wait this out another year too, right? Holden Geriner and Hank Brown really can't. Like, next year, it's them or nothing for them. Like, and again, I think Holden Geriner, he's already pretty much in his mind, he's like started marking out where he wants to leave, and he's got his bags packed. He's just kind of waiting on the opportunity to finish. But Hank Brown is sitting there like, I want to wait this out, but is he going to get the shot? Because next year really is it, right? If he doesn't do it next year, when is he going to get a chance?
Yeah. You're going to lose somebody. I was shocked that they kept as many guys in that quarterback room as they did.
Yeah.
But this year, clearly the math is going to be a lot more dialed in terms of where they're going at the quarterback position. If you're Walker White, you've got to take clear steps forward
right
after this season, or, depending on how things fall during the season, to say, hey, I'm going to be the guy next year. It's not a question. And you need that, for Hugh Freeze, he needs that first guy to jump off that position. He does. So they've decided we're going to lean into Peyton and we're going to improve all the things around him. And then if we have a young guy step into the position, he'll have as many pieces around him as a young guy could possibly hope for, so that he has time to come along in terms of development. So if you're Walker White and you're stepping in, it's a blessing to be thrown to Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson with a year of experience under their belt. This is why I think, Jay Fair got out of here. It's because you see where they're headed with these young guys and trying to set this up for the future. And it's like, I'm going to dip, because they're going to play these young guys. It feels like no matter what. They may not be better right now, but the plan for the future is to get them there quickly so that they can support the young guy that you're eventually going to have to play at quarterback. Hugh Freeze believes this, and I've never agreed with Hugh Freeze more on anything than this point right here. If you keep going to the portal to get guys with 2 to 3 years of eligibility, you cannot recruit effectively from high school.
It's going to be difficult.
It's going to be really hard.
You once you start that ball in motion, you kind of have to keep going in that direction.
Lane Kiffin is a perfect example of it.
There are.
Good luck. That guy will almost
Deion
never.
Sanders. Deion Sanders came in the door saying he was going to do it via the transfer portal because he wanted to try to get immediate success. It's not working at Colorado.
It's not working at Colorado, right?
Ole Miss. I think Lane Kiffin has done a good job of it at Ole Miss, but the question is, can he build a championship roster?
Correct.
Yes, he improved his roster.
Has he gone as far as he can go with it at Ole Miss?
Right. Because we saw the early success at Michigan State with this, right?
Yeah.
That first season, bunch of transfer portal guys, it looked really good.
Yeah.
And you go to the next season, can you duplicate that success and can you build on it? That's tough, man.
I'm with you on this one, Hugh. High school is still the way to do it, right? You bring in guys who you teach your way. You say this is the way. They buy into that. They stay there for years. They wait their turn. They step in, and you have a pipeline of kids that can come in, and it's patchwork from the portal.
Yeah.
It's
the only place I think that did this well was Florida State, right? And even they went undefeated last year and was a quarterback injury away from everybody saying, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know.
The Lane Kiffin analogy, it fits so perfectly with this, because you've got a guy who's consistently gone to the portal almost more than anybody else at the Power 5 or Power 4 level now, however many we're down to get starting talent.
Right.
And he's done it. Now, I personally think Kiffin is exemplary at the development piece. He's got a set system. He knows how to get the most out of the pieces that he has. So it works for him because he'll plug and play and he'll set this thing up. Personally, I think Lane Kiffin is the gift and the curse. I think he's the reason that they've gone as far as they have gone. but also the reason they may not be able to go any further than they've gone.
Yeah, this is. I personally think that this has to be a prove it year for Lane Kiffin. They're coming in with a third-year returning quarterback as a starter, one of the best transfer portal classes that anyone has seen out here recently. In the SEC specifically, again, that Florida State class last year was amazing, and so he did a really good job of putting that. But you have to. I think he's got to get and it's the 12-team playoff year. He's got to get it done this season.
Yeah, and by get it done, to me, I'm like, you have to make a 12-team playoff. If he doesn't make a 12-team playoff,
100% has to make the playoff.
Absolutely, a season is a failure for him.
And I think you have to win at least one game in that playoff with Lane Kiffin this season. I don't think just making it for him is going to be enough. Now, I'm not saying they're going to fire him at Ole Miss. Don't. Yeah. I think he's going to prove that maybe his ceiling is just, okay, I can get you a top 15 team, maybe a top 10 team. I don't know that Lane Kiffin has proven he can build a championship roster yet.
Is the season a failure if they don't make the playoff? I mean, again,
for that class, I would say yes.
Yes.
If
definitely.
I were an Ole Miss fan looking at Lane Kiffin in this progression of where he is as how many years he's been coaching and having a third-year starter, them not making the 12-team playoff, I think, is a disastrous season.
Yeah, it would be. Now, they would have made a 12-team playoff last year, no doubt. Ole Miss is in a 12-team playoff last year. But coming back to our point here is that he's done it with a high percentage of portal kids.
Right.
And Lane Kiffin is the outlier, though, in this conversation, Ike, when you talk about doing it from the portal. Now, where does that leave Hugh Freeze? Because he does not believe that's the way to sustain it, and the evidence suggests that Hugh Freeze is absolutely right. Show me the program right now over the last 4 or 5 years that has gone to the portal consistently for a majority of their starting talent and is in the conversation for national titles. Right? It's all the same programs at the top, man. It's the Alabamas, it's the Georgias, right? It's the Florida States. It's all the people who have had strong high school recruiting for the last, 10 years,
right?
10 to 15 years that are still at the top of this conversation.
Right.
So,
and I think that, like you said correctly, Coach Hugh Freeze knows, okay, I can make adjustments here and there with the portal, but my baseline has to be the high school.
Correct. Okay. So let's say, with this receiver class that they brought in, Cam and Perry and Bryce and Malcolm Simmons are clearly dudes. Right. But you don't have a quarterback. Your offensive line looks good, but for whatever reason, a quarterback didn't stand out this season, and you're not sure. Now you can go to the portal and say, we're one quarterback away from being, a playoff powerhouse. And you can attract a top portal QB. Now, I think it was me and you that talked about this, about players, especially quarterbacks, going when they transfer, even before the portal, when it was just JUCO transfers, to the program that has the most pieces in place.
Right.
That's why Cam chose Auburn, because he saw an extremely senior-laden offensive line. And subsequently, the year after, it's why Auburn couldn't get Russell Wilson, because it was down to Auburn and Wisconsin, and he went to the program with the extremely senior-laden offensive line.
Right.
So, because of the way the game has evolved, now you might want to go to places with the most solid skill positions. I'm going to go someplace where they've got Cam Coleman's and Perry Thompson's and guys that I can throw to, because if I believe in myself, I'm going to break records with those guys. And it gives you more options if you're Hugh Freeze to not have to go out and get a super game breaker, right? Somebody who can just get the ball to those guys and you can still find success. And then to close the gap between you and the rest of college football, you have to outcoach everybody else.
Right.
This is where I think Ole Miss has hit their ceiling with Lane Kiffin. Can Lane Kiffin outcoach the top 3 to 4% of college football?
Yeah.
He hasn't proven that he can do it yet. Yeah.
Every time he runs up against one of those coaches, he blows it.
His losses to last year were Missouri and Alabama.
Right.
Right. Two teams that finished in the top 10 of the AP standings last year. I think this will be Eli Drinkowitz's charge as well, too. They're trying desperately to improve their high school recruiting.
Right.
Our guy over at Dog Dispatch, John Smith, talked about, hey, Missouri is over focusing on skill positions, right? And going to the portal and getting all these guys, but they will never catch up until they improve in the trenches. Because what's going to happen is it's going to look pretty until you run into the Georgia, no pun intended, it's got dogs down there.
Right.
So, can a program be in a place where you have a strong high school recruiting base, but you're plugging the gaps with kids from the portal for positions that just happen to not work out? Right. And then you just keep it pushing. That's the correct way to use the portal, if you ask me. And the advent of the portal gives coaches in that position more options to choose from. To say, hey, I need a QB. There are going to be more QBs in the portal because it's harder to keep a good QB who's talented, but you want to wait on your roster if I have an opportunity for them to play now.
Yeah.
That's it.
Let's pivot here. Let's take a little quick break. Get to talking to some of these folks out here in the chat. You guys have gotten some really interesting comments that I want to highlight here.
Yeah.
But you all are watching the Weekend Tailgate, brought to you by the good folks at Golden's Cast Iron. This edition of the War Report is brought to you by our generous sponsors. The Opelika Rage Room in Opelika, Alabama. The Rage Room is a place where anger and stress find their ultimate release. Call or text 334-777-6688 to set up a session today, or check them out online at opelikaRageroom.com. Golden's Cast Iron. Whether you work out, grill out, or chill out, you deserve the best life possible, and Golden's Cast Iron is here to provide the tools to help you do it. Check them out at goldenscastiron.com.
Guys, you already know the deal. Become a patron. $5.99 a month will get you there. We appreciate you guys for signing up. Help keep the work that we're doing going at a high level. Media Days is coming. Guys, we need you. Media Days is coming. They put that joint in Dallas this year. So Ike and I will be going out. I got a lot of stuff to take with me, Ike. So we're going to be driving to Dallas. And if you want to help get us there, $5.99 will pay for 1 gallon of gas at these gas prices, or 20% charge on the Tesla. Whatever you decide to do, sign up for a Patreon membership. Help us keep that work going. Also, you can give the gift of the War Report by hitting that gifted membership button. Saw 20 giving away, Ike.
Yep, Drake Barefoot gave 20, Auburn Dad with 5, Tiffany Byers with 5.
That's 30. Can we get to 50? Can we get 50 memberships given away today? That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
Let's get 20 more in there, guys. We appreciate you for doing that. Give the gift of the War Report. Lots of great content behind that paywall. Guys, check out the War Report Podcast Network, Auburn Express, Uptempo, College Loop, and Just a Sec. If you haven't noticed, we've added a segment that we're doing once a week here with my guy, John Smith from the Dog Dispatch, technically Auburn Express and Just a Sec. But we're talking about an Auburn, Georgia kind of flavor, what's going on with those two programs. At the Dog Dispatch, they believe that Auburn will be one of the top 3 programs in the conference very soon. And so we have not invited anybody else worthy of being a part of that conversation. But at the time that happens, we'll add them to the conversation. Support us over there on podcast. Subscribe, download. You guys know the deal. And last but not least, want to thank title sponsor Golden's Cast Iron. It's the summer, and whether you're I'm getting my weight up this summer. I've started a weight loss journey that my doctor says is absolutely necessary for health reasons. So I'm on a journey to lose 50 pounds between now and the beginning of September, start of football season.
Okay.
I got 50 pounds to lose. And I'm doing it in part with Golden's Cast Iron. I've got some kettlebells and dumbbells here at the house, and I'm grilling up some lean meats on the Kamado grill that I have here to try to get the diet right, because you cannot outwork your diet. Listen, you can run from your diet, but your diet will catch you every single time. I promise, no matter how fast you are, your diet is faster. So Golden's Cast Iron is helping me there. Use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off those weights, and code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills.
Absolutely. All right, let's get over here into the conversation. Just so you know, since you asked, 10 more memberships have been given away. So thanks to Stephen Neely and Tiffany Byers again for giving 5 more. So only 10 away from the request that Mike G made. So awesome. Auburn Dad out here with the super chat says, in the state of football as it is, you have to play the young ones early or they dip. I'm glad Hugh spent on improving pieces around PT than buying a used quarterback. So he's saying he likes the strategy of getting the young ones in. Wesley Hilson gets us 5 more closer to that goal. So we are 5 away from the gifted membership goal today. Appreciate you all very much for those contributions. But yeah, Auburn Dad says, hey man, I like the strategy of not going and getting a quarterback out of the portal. Now, we focused mostly on the portal. We're going to broaden this conversation a little bit in a minute to other places strategically around high school versus transfer portal. But the portal quarterback conversation is always an interesting one because it's proven to be successful for some and not for others. Like, if we're being honest, and Auburn Dad gave 5. There we are. That's the magic number has been achieved already. 50 memberships given away today. But
can we get 100? Yeah, I'll give a move.
But but yeah, it's been successful for some. And the question you have to ask yourself, well, this is the question I would ask myself, and I'll pose this question to you before we get to some more of these comments. What's success when you pay that much money for a transfer quarterback, right? Like, you get a guy in the transfer portal. How many wins does that person need to get you because the question, like, okay, so I asked this question last year, and let me reframe the conversation a little bit. How many additional wins did the acquisition of Peyton Thorne get Auburn last year? I argued 0. That was a net 0 in my opinion. I think a 6-win season could have been achieved with any of the quarterbacks that were on the roster last season based upon what last season panned out to be. People can argue differently than that. I would say it didn't net you anything this year. I do think you could potentially see some more dividends this season if Peyton Thorne is allowed to throw the football more, system around him, all that kind of stuff. But how many more wins does that transfer quarterback that's costing you $1 million? That's the number Coach Hugh Freeze threw out there. That's the number Brian Kelly recently threw out there. What's the guy from Nebraska? Right? Like, that's the number everybody's throwing out there is $1 million for a quarterback. How many more wins above what you would have had without them does that quarterback need to have for you for that to be a good investment?
Okay, so if your baseline is 6, then 3 needs to be worth 3 wins because a 9-win season is bordering on, in the SEC is bordering on playoff contention.
Okay,
right. If you're at like 4 or 5 wins, then that $1 million, he needs to be worth 5 wins, right? Like, it needs to be 9 to 10 wins if you're going to pay that much money for a quarterback. If not, stick with the guys in your system and continue to develop, because the truth is, if adding a dynamic QB is not going to get you to 9 to 10 wins, it's because you're too far away in other areas for it to make a difference, if that makes sense. So, Jaden Daniels, for example.
Okay.
Without LSU, without Jaden Daniels, LSU is a 6-win football team last year. True or false?
Oh, true. Yeah, but that wasn't his first year, though.
It wasn't.
And they definitely did not spend $1 million to go.
Yeah, sure, right. Yeah, but my point is that that's the type of impact you would be looking for from a guy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, agreed.
If you're going to spend $1 million, I want a guy like Jaden Daniels who's going to come in. Now, you can never predict that a guy is going to have a 50 touchdown year.
Right.
Nobody predicts that. You think he's going to be good, but is he going to be Heisman good? It feels like we're always surprised by that most years, which guy wins the Heisman. Can we agree with that? Yeah. Right? Like, nobody thought Joe Burrow was going to throw for 60 touchdowns in 2019.
Yeah, no.
Going in. We thought he might be a better quarterback.
Preseason hype around the guys who were going to be good just going into last year. I don't think that if you were not a diehard LSU fan, that you were saying to yourself, Jaden Daniels is going to be in the Heisman conversation.
Yeah. Right, for sure. So every year, it's almost never the guy they project that wins it all. So my point, especially a quarterback. So my point is because you can't really project that. You need to be closer to where you want to be for that guy to be able to make a difference. For LSU, they had receivers, they had most of the pieces in place to bring in a solid quarterback and be, and their defense was historically bad. That's the only reason LSU. We're not sitting here talking about LSU as a national title. With an average defense, they run roughshod through this playoff. I don't care what anybody says.
I mean, that offense was that good.
Yeah, right. But the defense was that bad.
Right.
It was solely the thing that kept them out of the national title conversation was they could not stop anybody. They beat Bama, right? Like they beat Georgia in the SEC title game. There's not a single team that made that playoff that would have been able to contain Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
Not one. It damn sure wasn't going to be Washington or any of them weak-ass Pac teams. Right? Like, come on now. And
Michigan had a really good defense. I think it would have been that. I would have loved to see that game.
It would have been a great matchup, but I'm giving the
I
edge
just don't
to
think
Jaden Daniels in that offense.
Again, to your point, if LSU's defense was better, I don't know that Michigan could outscore LSU.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback who was second in the league in rushing yards. He is a true dual threat.
Yeah.
With 2 first-round receivers.
Right.
And it was similar to 2019 in that, Ike, those guys weren't exactly bailing him out. He was dropping dots to Brian Thompson and Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
He was dropping dots to those guys, and that's how you get a Heisman season out of a quarterback.
Right.
So if you're not at least there, right? Like if you're not, again, to me, they're a 6-win team without Jaden Daniels. With Jaden Daniels, they were a 9 to 10 win team. They were close.
Let me put a very specific team on the question here then, because the guy that this really circles around, if you connect the dots, if we're going to be honest, is Cam Ward, right? Because there was interest from Auburn, there was interest from Nebraska for his services during the offseason, and it really came down to that's too much money to spend. He ends up at Miami. Miami last season, how many wins did Miami have last season? Somebody can look that up for me. I should have looked that up before I started this whole situation. Miami last season, an average football team. Going into and a lot of Miami fans thought last year was going to be the year. Miami comes back and they reclaim their prominence in the ACC. Didn't happen. They go out and they get Cam Ward. 7-6 last year. How many more wins do they need to get with Cam Ward as their starting quarterback for that to make any sense?
They've got to be a 10-win football team.
So if Miami doesn't win 10 games next season, you look at that and you say that was not money well spent.
That was not money well spent.
Because that's a 1 year. They're not going to get Cam Ward for 2 seasons. He's one and done there.
Yeah, you've got to win 10 games next year to make that worth it. Because in a 12-team playoff, 10 games gets you in the conversation for the back half of that playoff. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. The playoff expansion has widened this debate to some extent about what's worth it and what success is. You no longer have to, that year that the Alabama won the national title without winning the SEC, right, which was 2017. Right. Listen, that year isn't any less empty for Alabama because they didn't win the SEC title that year. They brought home a national championship.
Right.
Now you're giving that opportunity to more schools, I guess is my point, to not win their conference, but end the year a national title game. So if you don't make the playoff after you went and spent $1 million on a portal QB, it wasn't worth it.
Right.
12 teams get a chance to make it. Presumably, your Power 4 conference winners will probably make the playoff.
They're guaranteed a spot, the Power 4 conference.
Right. There may be a rare instance where the conference winner is not the highest seed from that conference.
Okay.
Depending on how the division split up and if you have some kind of weird, you know what I mean, where the lesser team technically wins the conference title and he's in, right? But, for the most part, your 4 conference winners will make it, and then you've got 8 spots. So maybe your 4 runner-ups in those conferences plus, so that gets you to 8. 2 more from the SEC, because 4 teams are going to make it from this conference.
Yeah.
16 teams and 4 teams are going to make it, and at least 2 spots. Your at larges, like, you know what I mean? Is there a G5 team that sneaks in there? If you don't get the 10 wins and make this 12-team playoff, there's no way you spend $1 million on portal QB.
Yeah.
So if you're Auburn,
I'd be interested in hearing what Miami fans feel about this. Like,
yeah.
what is your because, man, they had some questionable games last year from the head coach, right? The infamous timeout situation that they had last year. And then now they ponied up the money and they said, all right, coach, we're going to go get you a shirt. Like, Cam Ward was going to the NFL. Like, let's be clear. He might not have gotten as high a draft number as he wanted, which is why he came back to college. But he was going to the NFL. So you have an NFL caliber quarterback on your roster this season. You got, like you said, you got to make the playoff. You spend if that number is real and you spent $1 million on a 1-year prospect for quarterback, you have to make the playoff with all the talent that Miami has down there. I think that's unacceptable if you don't do that. Like, and I think that's the place that Coach Hugh Freeze was in. He's in that same situation. Do I spend this much money on a guy who's only going to be here for a year? Or do I ride year 2 with a guy that I already have here and figure it out with him? Because I don't know that we're 1 quarterback away. Is that what Coach Hugh Freeze is? I don't know that we're just a quarterback away. If we were just a quarterback away, maybe. But is he thinking maybe we're not just a quarterback away? I can spend this $1 million on 5 different guys and go get probably the same result as if I had just gotten 1 quarterback. And we're better everywhere else going into next season.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. This is where me and Hugh Freeze we're brothers in arms in this discussion.
Yeah.
Build it from high school and then plug the holes, the places that don't develop the way you plan, plug them with kids from the portal.
Yeah.
Right. So, a great example of this would be Keandre Lambert-Smith, right? Look, man, they believe in their high school recruiting class. Right. I mean, it's pretty clear. Like, they're ecstatic about this high school recruiting class. But do they you bring Keandre Lambert-Smith in because there's a chance that those guys might not be where you need them to be next year. You're still going to work them in. They're still going to get their time because he wants them to stay on the roster next year. But you bring Keandre Lambert-Smith in to plug the experience gap.
Right.
For a year, and then you send him on his way, and then you go right back to your pipeline of kids that you're bringing up. Quarterback is always a harder discussion because that guy affects the offense more than anybody else.
Correct.
Touches the ball every single play. And so it's tough, and you can only put one on the field at a time. So it's a difficult conversation. We're talking about quarterback and the margin for error in terms of how your team does offensively and whether you miss on that it's a low margin for error.
Right.
You got to get it right in today's college football because 3 yards in a cloud of dust football is gone, man. Dynamic quarterback play is winning championships. The J.J. McCarthy's are rare.
Right.
I mean, it's just rare. And you need all-world defenses and you need some things to be good. So it's not the only way to win the championship, but it's very difficult to do in today's college football, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, every 5 or 6 years, maybe we see a team that's just completely dominant on defense take home a championship.
I mean, honestly, if we look at it more recently, it's actually turned into the teams that build the better defense. You talk about the back-to-back years from Georgia. Now, you did have Stetson Bennett play way above his head year 2, but year 1 Stetson Bennett, it was all about that defense. Year 2 Stetson Bennett, it was a little mix of both, right? But then you go into last year, Michigan, it was all about that defense and their run game.
Yeah,
right?
they had to take a huge leap offensively in year 2 for Georgia to bring home that national title, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, because the Ohio State playoff game, that was an offensive shootout.
For sure.
I mean, as good as that defense was, they couldn't stop Ohio State from scoring because, again, everybody's got that dynamic playmaker at that level on the other side that despite how well you scheme it up, he's just that hard to stop.
Yeah.
So I hear you. Like I said, I mean, the Michigans, the Georgias, there are a few examples of that over the last 10 years. Before that, the only team I can think of that was just so dominant defensively in the playoff era, I can't think of that team.
Yeah. Yeah, it had been dynamic offenses there. Now,
like
you had
you
to
have
have
to go
a
back to
decent
the
defense.
BCS.
But
You have to go back to the BCS 2012 Alabama.
Right.
Maybe, right? Like, I mean, it's difficult to find that team. And so, I would argue it even started maybe a little bit with 2010 Auburn. That defense gave up more points than any national champion in the history of college football. By the numbers, there's no way they should have been able to win that national title.
Right.
But they had enough juice offensively with that dynamic quarterback
right.
to get them over that hump. And then the defense just had to be opportunistic in terms of turnovers, and making plays here and there. But they gave up a lot of points that year.
For sure.
By the numbers, I mean, they needed a miracle at Alabama to stay in the conversation. 24-0. And who was it that saved the day? It was Cam Newton.
Right.
Any other quarterback would have been absolutely flattened after that first half that Auburn had offensively in that game. So you need that guy at quarterback, and I think that Hugh Freeze understands that. So can he come in and can he do what he did with a Malik Willis? Right? Can he get just the type of production that he got out of Bo Wallace and Chad Kelly and those guys? Those would be amazing numbers at Auburn.
For sure.
He's working with more talent. He will be working on average with better talent than anywhere he's ever coached, including his first stint at Ole Miss.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, the talent doesn't really compare.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Like, if you go back and you look at the average recruiting classes that Gus was bringing in during those times, if Hugh was working with that talent and he can go out and find the quarterback that Gus could not find, he makes the playoff. During that time, where he was at Ole Miss, if you put Hugh Freeze at Auburn, and with his seemingly quarterback prowess during that era, Auburn makes a playoff. They probably, if you give him Jarrett Stidham, he probably makes the 2017 playoff. He's that much better than quarterbacks than what Auburn has had. Now, does that continue here? We'll see. But like I said, when you're talking about the portal, to me, it's really about how close are you with the guys around you.
Right.
That guy that you're bringing in that you're going to pay $1 million for. Because if you're not at least a 6-win team, I wouldn't even waste my time. I wouldn't, right? Since 10 wins can get you in the playoff, right? If you go out and you get that guy, like you said with Miami and Cam Ward, right? If he's worth 4 wins over what you did last year, then it was worth it.
Right.
If he gets you from 7 to 8, it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
If it gets you from 7 to 9, I would argue it's still probably not worth it because 9 is probably in that conference. It's not going to get you in.
Right. And that's the biggest problem that I think a lot of these programs are going to start to see is, are you getting, or they're going to have to start to realize is, are you actually getting the return on the investment? And are these young men in the transfer portal overvaluing themselves for what they're actually going to be able to accomplish in year one in the transfer portal? Because then this is something that Coach Hugh Freeze said when he was talking about this. I think somebody had a comment about it. And I thought I had started here. But basically, he had said early in the process, he was like, show me the example of guys in their first year transferring somewhere that actually that it panned out. It doesn't happen. It's year 2 that you start to see the guys who transferred really take that step and they take the program in a different direction. But the 1-year rental program for a quarterback has not worked anywhere.
No,
it hasn't worked anywhere.
Yeah, it hasn't. It hasn't. And
not to the tune of a championship. Now, they might play well, but it hasn't. None of the teams that have won championships are on 1-year rental quarterbacks. It hasn't happened.
So maybe that's where Hugh Freeze is at with this.
Yeah.
Is that, like, there are not really any examples of guys going to the portal and paying $1 million for a guy and it having a significant impact on the outcome of their season.
I see folks mentioning Cam Newton. I'm talking about in the transfer portal
era. Yeah, in the transfer portal era, right? Like, it's, or at least in the playoff era.
Right.
So 2014 and on, I mean, just like the 1-year rental guys not really working out a whole lot. And the transfer portal, what, 2020? New transfer portal 2020. So we've had about 4 years with it. Yeah, it's the way where college football is going now. It's rare to see. So like I said, it's hard when we talk about looking back at this conversation because I understand that the game has changed quite a bit since Cam was at Auburn. It's not the same college football, and I think the offenses have just come so far. I mean, it is really hard when you get a defense like Georgia's. It's just so rare because you have to have the perfect scheme matched with tons of 5-star talent. But it's really hard to go out and just scheme up a great defense because the athletes on the other side of the football are so good.
Right.
I mean, think about this, right? Look, when we talk about how good Georgia's defenses were during their back-to-back national title runs, Bo Nix played Georgia 4 times.
Yeah.
When he got to Oregon, all we heard was he's going to have the receivers he didn't have at Auburn, and he's going to have the offensive line he didn't have at Auburn, and he's going to have the scheme he didn't have at Auburn. They didn't score a single touchdown in that game.
Right.
They flew across the country, kicked a field goal, and went home. He had statistically the worst game, including his freshman year, that he's ever had versus Georgia. That's how good that defense was. Right? That's also how overrated the Pack offenses are, but I digress. You get my point, though, right? Yeah. Like, those defenses, man, I'm telling you, the talent for them, it takes a rare mix of talent and scheme to be that good because the talent on the other side of the football is so good now. So, like I said, if you're not going out to get one of those guys in the portal, I'm with Hugh Freeze. Don't spend $1 million on a guy.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Save the money, and you have a better chance maybe of improving everything around an average QB and going further. And that seems to be how that they've taken with Peyton. They're saying when he had Keon Coleman and the other dude, he was pretty good. He was 3,000 yards good. Now, we noted on a previous episode, I think on our last episode, his interceptions still would have been high, even in his better years. Turnovers would have been still kind of a problem, but the output offensively would have been good for at least 3 more wins at Auburn last year, if not 4. Right? Like 2021 Peyton Thorne would have beat Alabama. You don't have to worry about losing to New Mexico State, so you're up to 8 wins. You probably beat Maryland, and you maybe give Georgia a run for their money. It's a 10-win team, and that's what we're talking about. Like, if you don't, but you'd have to have had all the pieces ready for Peyton to step into for him to be the difference between 6 and 10 wins. Auburn didn't have that. They were further away, and Thorne wasn't Jaden Daniels, so he wasn't going to be able to just come in and carry a team like that. Definitely not Cam Newton. When I was talking to Peyton, like during our interview, Peyton mentioned that when he got to Auburn, he looked at the record books. He went into the Auburn room of records, and he sat down and he looked at Cam Newton's season, and he was like, "What? He did what?" You hear about it, but when he got here and sat down and looked at it, he couldn't believe what a crazy season Cam Newton had. Not a single draft pick on offense on that team was Cam.
Right.
That's what people are having. And again, so he's worth $1 million. Break the bank for Cam Newton. When Trooper Taylor went out to Blend to see Cam, he came back and he told Gene Chizik, we have to get this dude.
Right.
This guy has to be our quarterback. The coaches were convinced after they saw him play, this guy will be like, we're going to set our program back if we don't go out and get Cam Newton. And, like I said, a year later, they found out how right they were about that prediction. But, Chizik never went out to Blend to see Cam. He trusted his assistants, and they were just like, they came back excited, saying, hey, man, we need to go get this dude. Now, who were his backup was Barrett Trotter?
Yeah.
Like, the guys behind Cam were light years behind Cam.
Right.
So without him, Auburn might be looking at another 7-win season, 7 or 8 win season without Cam. So he was good enough to carry those guys. But again, you don't plan on getting a Cam, Ike. You just don't. Right. So you got to be closer in terms of the talent around him to say, hey, and to me, that's 3 to 4 wins of striking distance. You got to be a strong 6 to 7 win team. Put Jaden Daniels on last year's Auburn. right? And Auburn wins 9 games. Auburn wins 9 games last year with Jay Daniels. Minimum.
Yeah.
And if he pulls some crap, maybe they even win 10 or 11 games. So, yeah, if that guy's worth $1 million in the portal. And I'm trusting that Hugh Freeze, fans are trusting that Hugh Freeze will be the guy to be able to pick if he decides to go to the portal to get a QB. We trust Hugh is going to get this right. Because it's going to be a lot of Walker White fans, and what's the guy that they're talking about that Auburn's looking strong for, Juju something?
Yeah,
like, there's going to be a lot of these young high school guys who are like, why are we going out to get a QB, man, if we got Walker White in the pipe?
Right.
And so you have to get that right, because you know what? If you don't, and he flops, Walker White's like, well, you lied to me. You brought a guy in to start over me, and he wasn't even better than me. I'm out of here. It's a tough job. In 2024, it's a hard job, Isaac.
Yeah, it's definitely.
It's a hard job.
I don't envy the
Juju
decisions
Lewis
that these coaches have to make. Let's get back over here into the chat really quick before we get out of here. Been a very good conversation today about this. Eugenia Akira says it wasn't that he didn't want to spend $1 million on a quarterback. He didn't want to spend another $1 million on a QB. Speaking of NIL, if you hypothetically cut an NIL player, can you use that money on another player?
Yeah, no, because you can't give the money back. Like, okay, let me explain this to everybody. Number one, I agree with this comment, right? Like, it's not that he want to spend the money. You already spent the money.
Right. You spent money last year on a now.
Yeah,
again,
right.
I don't know if the number was $1 million, but you spent money last year.
You
on
spent enough.
Horn. Yeah.
Yeah, you spent enough that it gave you pause. And
right.
Don't get it twisted. Somebody gave a majority, if not all, of that money because you said you needed it. And then it turned out the way it did. And you do not have a case to go back and say, give me $1 million now.
Right.
After I went out, after
right.
you gave me,
that's like, hey man, you gave me $5 last week to go do a thing, and I was like, and I blew all of that, but I need 50 this week, and I promise you it's gonna be better. It's like, what? No, the last, no.
Yeah. It's like any company where you have investors, and you're trying to show your investors that a company is moving the right direction, and so in to satisfy your current investors and attract new investors. Right. There was nothing that happened last year offensively that would attract new investors. So he leaned hard into the recruiting aspect of it and then asked for time. And that's how you attract new investors, because it damn sure wasn't because of anything they produced last year. So when coming back to the other part of this comment, can you bring the comment back up?
Oh, I unstarted, but continue.
I got it here.
Yeah.
Can you use that money on another player?
Yeah.
Well, yes and no. The money is not being paid out in a lump sum most of the time.
Correct.
Right? It's being paid out in installments, and there are deliverables that are attached to that. You need to do this many interviews. You need to sign this many autographs. There's a fulfillment side of this. So as you fulfill your obligations, the money is paid out usually per month.
And let's be clear about that. None of those obligations have anything to do with playing football.
Playing football.
Right. So
that's all
they can sit on the
stuff.
bench. Like, so the question was asked, if you cut a player, it's not like the NFL, you cut them and they leave the team. You can not play them, but they'll just sit on the bench collecting whatever NIL money you've guaranteed them over the period of that NIL contract.
Correct. The difference is that
they have to leave.
Most of the fulfillment piece is tied to things that require you to be physically present. So once you leave, you can no longer fulfill those obligations, which means they no longer have to pay you.
Right.
So
I say, so the player has to leave. You can't just not play them and then all of a sudden they stop getting that. No, they just sit on the bench.
They just sit on the bench and collect it. Yeah, as long as they're doing the other things that actually they're getting paid for, they can continue to go collect that check. So if they decide, if Hugh Freeze says, I want you to leave, and the kid's like, I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
Now those NIL contracts usually have a 1-year term attached to them.
Correct.
So they could be renegotiated at the end of that term. So you're not stuck with that original number. And they leave themselves some outs here, dude. It's all contract stuff. It's boring to some extent. But the answer is yes, because whatever is unpaid that was committed goes back in the pot.
Right.
Right. Whatever is unpaid. So, if it was, hey, we'll pay you $1 million over 2 years and you only spend a year here, it's $500,000 left. That 500,000 goes back in the pot.
Right.
We never paid it out. Now the commitment is usually paid if there is a donor, right, and it says, I will commit $1 million to NIL over the next year, right? That's usually not given in a lump sum either.
Right.
So you don't have that, like, if you commit $1 million to a player, like, in some cases, I'm not saying this is happening at Auburn, money is being committed that has not technically been received yet. This is just how business works, guys.
Right.
Like, it happens on every business level, right? Like, because there are projections and people are like, I'll give you $500K up front and 500 more at the end of the season. Right. It leaves everybody some out or recourse if things don't go as planned. So the answer to this question is yes and no, right? Like I said.
Got the clarification here. By cut, I mean encourage them to leave by pulling their scholarship. Again, it's not contingent on their play. So you can pull my scholarship, right? The NIL money is still owed.
Yeah. If I decide to stay in school, right, it cannot be contingent on me playing a single down.
Correct. It is not paying them to play. It's paying them to be on the Auburn roster. And you can be on the Auburn roster without a scholarship. You're on the roster. You're showing up, doing all of the stuff that I have to do as far as appearances, blah, blah, blah. That's why you can get a Towns Mago, however you pronounce his last name, to come be here without a scholarship because they're like, oh, we'll supplement what you would have gotten from a scholarship with NIL stuff.
And you're fine. Yeah.
Right. It. So yes,
baseball is doing this as well too, right?
It happens all the time,
right? Because they only give half scholarships, and NIL is helping them fill full cost of attendance with that they can't give legally. Alabama has some baseball recruiting rules and that really put them at a disadvantage to other states, right? And so they're using NIL to fill the gap there where they cannot offer full scholarships to a lot of baseball players. Yeah. So to bolster your point, it's you can have a walk-on with no scholarship that's got a huge NIL deal, and as long as he's doing what was asked of him, which has nothing to do with how many balls he kicks, they got to keep paying him for the term of that contract.
For sure. James Barnett and Eugenia, 5 memberships from James Barnett, Eugenia with another 10. So thank you so much for that. That brings the total up to 55 for today. Is that 65? Amazing. You guys are awesome. James Barnett with the chat here says, if we spend $1 million on Juju, he's not sitting. So if that was to happen, do Walker White and Hank Brown both leave? So you're saying if they go and get Juju Lewis next year and offer him a bunch of money in NIL once he signs, do you lose both Walker White and Hank Brown?
You lose somebody.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know which one. You lose somebody, yeah.
One of those two guys may be patient enough to say, well, let me just see if he's going to be like, he's not going to sit, but is he going to play well? Because this is what happened with Jaden Rashada, right? It's what happened with Jaden Rashada. This would happen with, there's another quarterback, the kid out at UCLA, whose name is escaping me. Both of these guys went and they started their freshman season with all these promises. They were out of there by their sophomore year because they got out there and they played, and it wasn't the kind of thing that they thought it was going to be. They ended up getting benched. So you might say to yourself, all right, cool. You gave him a bunch of money up front. Let's see what he's actually got. Now, if he goes out there and he kills it his freshman season, you're out of there.
Yeah, for
there's
sure.
no there's no reason you would lose the starting job if you're killing it your freshman year to somebody who's a sophomore or junior just because, we want to, So, but yeah, it's possible that you lose one, if not both. Yes, it just depends on the patience of that person to see that process through with that gentleman's first year, if that were to happen. Another super chat here. Tiffany Byers gave another 5 memberships. Thanks so much, Tiffany, for doing that. It's like 15 memberships Tiffany's giving away today.
Oh, man.
So there's a lot of people in the chat benefiting from the generosity of the War Report community. We thank you guys so much. And I'm going to make sure I get some film out this week for you guys on something so that we can make sure that you take advantage of that month that you have for free. And maybe you want to stay around a little bit longer. Super chat here from Romulus, who says, why is Robbie not starting at South Carolina?
Yeah,
I don't follow South Carolina enough to know this.
We talked a little bit about this, I think, like 2 shows ago. But like, look, man, they like him up there, but however, what I have been told is that there are things that they thought he would be further along with that he's not, that he hasn't been coached on. And so, in trying to close that gap in coaching, it's something you got to do before you put a guy out there.
Yeah. And again, I don't follow South Carolina enough to know the answer to that. I'm sure there's some really great South Carolina channels that could answer that question better than I could about how good this other kid, Lenore Sellers, is versus Robbie. I don't know. I didn't watch their spring game. I don't know anything about any of them. And it's not. I wish Robbie the best, right? Like, I don't have anything against Robbie. I think Robbie Ashford exited the right way that you want to exit a program. He played his butt off while he was here. I don't have a negative thing to say about Robbie Ashford, but I can't pretend that I've kept up with the situation with him outside of Auburn. So, more chats here, not necessarily of the super variety, but we'll try to get through those and then we'll get out of here. Let's see. This is a good one here from Tim, the Tool Main Taylor, who says, does a comment like that hurt future recruiting? Speaking of the comment that Coach Hugh Freeze made on Mac and Cube, does that hurt future recruiting? Let's pull the comment back up and let's see contextually what we're trying to get at as far as potentially hurting recruiting. The options that you're presented with are develop. I'm skipping over names here, or go spend $1 million on guys and just you couldn't bring himself to do that. I think it helps recruiting, does it not? It shows a commitment to the high school game rather than portal.
Yeah, I think that if you're a guy coming out of high school, you should feel good about that. You should feel good about that statement. And now mind you. You might be one of those kids in the portal, 2 years after you come out of high school. So right. You might feel differently then, but I think it helps recruiting, man. I mean, it's all about how he feels like he needs to build this. And he thinks he needs to build it from high school. So his messaging is going to favor the kids from high school.
And I mean, we haven't said this, and we've talked about it in partially in other conversations we've had, but where does that leash extend to Coach Hugh Freeze with this process, right? Like, at what point? Because he has a finite amount of time on his current contract, right? Year 4 is going to be here before he knows it, right? He's in year 2 coming up this season. How much time and patience is it going to be in, like, okay, you're getting good results out of high school. What percentage of those kids does he need to retain? Right, that allows that process to even build to be working, because you can have this really great class and then half of them transfer out the next season. You haven't really built anything. How many wins and what percentage retention does he need to start to see on these classes to be able to get into year 4 and say it's good enough and he gets a renewal? That's the question. That's all of the math that Coach Hugh Freeze needs to be doing for he and his staff right now. I don't know what the answer to that is, but that's really where I think it comes down to is it at what point in time do we stop and say, yes, it looks like this is working? Right now, it's too early to say. But year 3, do we look and say, hey, Coach Freeze, this doesn't look like this is the sound strategy. You need to shift. And is he willing to shift in year 3? Is it year 4? And what does that look like? I don't know the answer. Any of those questions, Mike, you have a venture at an answer on that?
Well, I mean, by year 3, you need to be bordering on, if not in the playoff. I mean, and that's unfortunately where we're at college football. Like, you need to show results fairly quickly. And you touted yourself as a guy who turns programs around quickly. He said that in his introductory press conference. Yes. So, like, and maybe it's a little bit of a contradictory message to say, well, give me time. Okay, well, but how much time? Because, I mean, you got 3 years.
Right.
So, like, you don't have to tell us that. You have 3 years. You got 3 years. And by year 3, if it's not clearly trending the right direction, like you know what I mean? For year 4, people are like, Auburn is on the precipice of. Right. Then you are going to have some uncomfortable questions to answer, and there's going to be some accountability asked for in terms of, like, how this program has been managed. Because here's the thing with bringing in recruiting classes, Ike, is that when they don't do well, it's harsh. The judgment is harsh, You got the kids you wanted, and now there's a lot of money involved with that as well too. So everybody wants accountability for how it's managed. We gave you the money, we gave you the resources, we gave you the unbridled backing and support. And what did it produce?
Correct.
His contract is set up, I believe, by year 3. After year 3, he won't be able to buy out. So if they wanted to move on, they could technically do that. I think that would set the program back personally. To go through another coach, 3 coaches since 2020 would be devastating. Like a 4th coach since 2020, Gus, Carson, Hugh, and then another. Like, wow. That's I don't know. But like I said, Auburn is a brand and it's a name, and that brand can go pretty far with the right pieces and the right guy at the helm. And I think Hugh Freeze thinks he's that guy, but you've got to be able to show it by year 3.
Yeah, we've been hearing about alignment for 2 years in a row. About Auburn finally has alignment from top to bottom. You got to show results with that alignment.
Yeah. What is it producing?
Yeah. Last one here. Lawrence Robinson says, which was the Jimbo Fisher downfall, right? Well, you got these great recruiting classes, but you can't produce championships or retain any of the guys. So what good was it doing us to spend all of this? Now, Jimbo Fisher swears this was just hard work and dedication from his staff, and it wasn't about the NIL spend. But his players who left would disagree that it wasn't about that. And I think the exodus of him from the program without the results would say people with money were like, look, bro, we paid you a lot of money and we ponied up a bunch of money for NIL, and you couldn't deliver wins for us. Have a good life wherever you decide to go, but it's not going to be at Texas A&M, because they were proclaiming championships the day he walked in the door at Texas A&M. They just knew they were going to win titles with Jimbo Fisher there, and they paid him like they were confident in that, and he didn't deliver a single one.
Which is wild, though. Like, all based on that one championship 10 years ago. Okay, all right, cool. The game has changed a lot since he had Jameis Winston. That's all I can say.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get out of here. We appreciate you guys jumping in. This is a great conversation today. You all have contributed mightily to that conversation, and we got a lot of memberships given away, so we appreciate that. Mike G, before we let the people go, tell them about how they can become a member in case somebody didn't get a free one today.
Yeah, listen, hit that join button. Become a member of the War Rapport. We appreciate you guys for supporting the work that we're doing here. That gifted membership button, look, check your email. If you are not a green name, and you're on the live stream today, you're likely to be on the receiving end of one of these free memberships. So check the email so that you can add that to your account and have yourself a green name. We hope that you guys will renew that after it expires. It's good for a month. After that, it's up to you to enter your credit card information and keep that going. I want to thank show sponsor Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/WR. Use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off your weights, and code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. They got some great stuff over there at Golden's Cast Iron. It's summer. You guys are going to be grilling out and chilling out and working out and doing all that stuff. Golden's Cast Iron can help you with that. I also want to thank show sponsor Manscaped, manscaped.com. Use code REPORT to get 20% off plus free shipping. Manscaped.com. They've been great partners with the War Report. Last but certainly not least, check us out on podcasts, Auburn Express, Uptempo, College Loop, and Just a Sec. All part of the the War Report Podcast Network, bringing you guys lots of great audio-only content.
Now, they're not a part of the pod network, but somebody did mention whether or not people were excited about College Football 25 that's coming out. We do have a gaming channel that we started with some guys from the network. So providing you content over there, the good folks at Uptempo, namely my guy Dustin, who has been doing some stuff with MLB The Show. So he's got a series where he's going through that. And then you've got Dylan Lark, who is over there doing some stuff with Madden. And we will be launching some content with college football. So make sure that you guys go check out TWR Gaming if you're into the gaming platforms. We got plenty of content that's going up over on that channel talking specifically about that. In fact, I've got a reaction video that Dustin did for us that's going to be going up of the new cover for College Football 25. So you guys make sure you go subscribe over there if you're into the whole gaming thing. The War Report's got stuff for you, baby. Like, if you like sports, we're doing it out here in these streets, man. So make sure y'all check in with us. Before you get out of here, do the necessary, sharing the content with somebody at the War Report on social media. Make sure you like the video, give us a good thumbs up down there. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are the War Report on X and Instagram, TW Report on TikTok. We'll be back at you with more content this week. A lot of great content coming up for you this week. But until the next time, and as always, War Eagle, we're out.
War Eagle.